I'm going to call this video something like, why I still don't want to buy Lydia, or some version of that, and I understand that that runs the risk of sounding extremely self-important. You know, why should you care whether I buy DLC or not? But I'm doing it in the context of older videos I've made where I said that I wasn't going to buy Lydia, and that was long before we had seen anything of her. We hadn't even seen her chin or her limo yet. I just wasn't going to buy the next character, whatever it was, because I didn't like the way Namco were doing characters at the time, and are still doing characters as far as I can tell. But in some of those videos I also said that I might buy her if she comes out very reasonable and balanced, or if they adjust her in some way that makes sense to me later down the line. But I've thought about it more and I realized that that's also a hypocritical and strange way of thinking about it. My point is that none of this has anything to do with the specific character of Lydia. I could also say that I think she represents the biggest triumph ever of the Tekken art department. If they have an art department, I don't know how that works, but she looks really cool. She looks human in a way you don't really see in fighting games. She has actual facial features, you know, that little button nose. If you knew a person that looked like that in the real world, if you dated them, you would probably boop that nose and call it cute. Her mother probably squeezed it all the time when she was a kid. It's a real facial feature that stands out, and I think in the past we've only ever gotten facial features in the shape of scars. And the internet seems to agree that this character is really cool. They're super excited about her. They're making all kinds of art of her, kicking the caps off of water bottles of her, doing sit-ups at the beach. But Lydia got nerfed really hard this week in the 4.20 update, and as someone who thought that she was really strong, maybe a bit too strong, you'd think that I'd be happy about that, but it actually just rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't understand why at first, so I thought about it and then I made this video. I think part of it is this thing I've talked about in the past of selling people a thing and then changing it after the fact. I think DLC characters in Tekken are pretty much being marketed as being stronger than they should be at this point. People know it, it's one of the main reasons they buy these characters, but then they get nerfed this hard. It's like walking into a bakery and buying a cake that is being advertised as being really big, and then you go home to eat it, but the baker walks in and cuts a third of the cake off and walks out with it, calling it a necessary adjustment. Now I get that you could use that as an argument for never changing a DLC character that you've sold to people, and that would also be a problem because these characters will need to be adjusted as a meta changes, but in order to at least minimize that, shouldn't your perspective be to try and release something as balanced as possible, needing as few adjustments and changes as possible? And if you think that is what they're doing, then I'm sorry if this sounds mean, but you might be the problem at this point because it obviously isn't true. If it were true, then why are the DLC characters only getting nerfed? Why haven't we had a DLC character that comes out, and then obviously we have these adjustments for like bugs and things, and I think those are very necessary. You need a lot of playtesting to find all these little things you need to adjust, but why haven't we seen a DLC character for over 2 years where the developers go, oh, this character might need a little bit more power, might need slightly higher combo damage, might need some better properties on some moves? It doesn't happen. Leroy came out and he was too good and they had to nerf him several times. Same thing with fucking Lam. Now the same thing is happening with Lydia, and I guess that's the thing that is rubbing me the wrong way. It does to an extent feel like a repeat of things we've seen in the past. I guess the one anomaly is Kunimitsu, who came out, in my opinion, was way too strong and still is way too strong, but she hasn't been nerfed yet. Maybe that will happen in the future. But it's kind of like a lose-lose-lose situation. When you release characters like this, when you nerf them really hard, it feels unfair for the people who like them and who already bought them. You obviously can't buff them because they're already too strong, and if you leave them the same, then you're stuck with the problem. And so, to minimize this ill will, I really think the point is you have to try and make characters as reasonable as possible before you release them. But are you prepared to sacrifice all of the sales you won't make if that's the way you go about it? I also wanted to talk briefly about the kinds of nerfs that we're seeing, because they seem to be very centered around damage a lot of the time, which seems to be kind of a quick and cheap and shallow solution to a lot of the problems. With Lydia, one of the main issues was whiff recovery, and they did change whiff recovery on some of her moves, and I think that's very good and very important. But she also got a lot of damage nerfs. Zafina is strong for all kinds of reasons, but she mainly got damage nerfs, and we've had combo damage nerfs specifically for all these characters, including Leroy and Fuckum Lam. And the thing that's a little bit strange about that is, I think Namco know exactly what the bread and butter combo for the character will be before release. When these characters come out, we find those bread and butter combos within 2 hours, or at least a couple of days of the character coming out. You know, it's pretty easy to find the most reasonable, reliable combo you're going to go to, and then you know how much damage it will deal. So if that's a number you have, why are you magically realizing, you know, a couple of weeks after the release that that damage is too high and needs to be adjusted? And when you're creating characters that are powerful for all kinds of reasons, you know, with Fuckum Lum, it's his range, it's his weird body. With Leroy, it's impact speed a lot of the time. It's overpowered mix-ups. I don't think you solve the problem in a healthy way when you keep nerfing damage and leaving a lot of the other problems in. And the shining example for me that I will bring up until it gets adjusted or I die, I guess, is Leroy's down 3-2. I still think it's like one of the most unreasonable move designs ever. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's sort of fine. I think another thing I want to say about this is I don't think it matters if you think Lydia was way too strong and needed to be nerfed, if you thought she was perfect, if you think she's still too strong after the nerfs. No matter how you feel about the character, we can all agree that she got nerfed really, really hard only a couple of weeks after being released. And it's a pattern that I'm not in love with, because I feel like now these characters are coming out with a sell-by date, and it's just another thing that is making me a little bit worried about how these games are going to be monetized in the future. But yeah, just something I was thinking about tonight. And like I say, I'm kind of sad about it, because if Lydia came out and was like, you know, underpowered or just very reasonable and none of these things were happening, you know, it would be a character that I would really be into, because I think she's really awesome. But you know, same thing with Leroy. And there you go. Thank you so much for listening to the video, and I'll see you guys again very soon.